I think the minister should stick to photo ops because comedy is surely not his thing.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. We're back to question period today after a week off for constituency week. As the fall economic update is around the corner, that's where the majority of Conservative attacks were focused today.
Let's get into it.
Speaker, after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of mortgage payments, which are already up 150%, and the Bank of Canada and the Parliamentary Budget Officer now agree with me that his deficits are driving up interest rates. Scotiabank says deficits are driving mortgage rates up 2%. That works out to $700 per month. While carpenters and nurses are already living in their cars, and the IMF says Canada's mortgage holders are the most at risk of crisis. Will the Prime Minister finally accept my common sense plan and announce the date and the plan to balance the budget and bring down interest rates on Canadian mortgages so people don't lose their homes?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
You know, it's interesting because a couple of people, we've watched in interviews that were asked, what Pierre is like. Stephen Harper actually said something, and he said that Pierre is very astute when it comes to the climate of politics, whether it's the economic climate, whether it's the political climate, it doesn't matter. And he said that Pierre was always saying things and noticing things way before everybody else. And then, initially people would look at him and say, are you serious? Or I don't think you're right. And then eventually he would be proven true. And it's not that he's a prophet or anything. He's just, he digs into the details, kind of like we do, and notices these trends before they are actually identified as trends. But this doesn't need to be something to put in that category, because it doesn't take a financial genius to predict that if you dump a whole bunch of new money into the economy, that's going to significantly drive up inflation, which is what the Conservatives have been saying for years now, since the pandemic. And now the mainstream banks are saying it. So there's no discussion around this anymore. The Liberals can't hide from this. The Bank of Canada has been saying it. Now Scotiabank and CIBC and Royal Bank and BMO, all of them are saying it. So what do you have to say about this, Miss Minister of the Treasury Board?
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear and accurate. Much of that spending referred to by the Leader of the Opposition was provincial in nature, not federal, Mr. Speaker.
Time out. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a classic Northern Perspective fact check time. So, I had pre-watched this a little bit. Fox hasn't seen this yet, and I've been waiting for this moment. Let's take a look and see what exactly Anita Anand was saying. So she's saying that the majority of that inflation that Scotiabank is saying, the majority of that spending is from the provinces. Well, here's the thing. If that were the case, then one would expect virtually all of the provinces, which overall they have a lower budget than the government of Canada. Let's just clarify that. But one would expect all of them to be running massive deficits if that were the truth, right?
Sounds like, that sounds accurate, yeah.
Because if they were running massive deficits, that means they're borrowing money from the Bank of Canada, which is printing more money and dumping it into the economy. Well, let's take a look. This is the RBC economic statement for all of the provinces, and most of them are up to date. So, let's take a look. Ontario by far has the biggest budget.
Well, it's got the most people.
Right. So Ontario's budget is around $200 billion. 204 to be exact. So you would say, okay, so they must be running a massive deficit, right? No, actually. Their deficit is $1.3 billion out of a $200 million budget. So that's a 0.5% deficit.
And, I mean, as much as we dislike Doug Ford, Ontario is being run by Conservatives, which are traditionally fiscally conservative. So that's why they don't have this huge outlandish deficit the way that Canada as a country does.
Well, and if you look here, their estimate for budget 24-25 is a $200 million surplus, and in 25-26 is a $4.4 billion surplus. So there's not much money printing going on there. Now, let's take a look at some of the other ones. So Newfoundland and Labrador predicts a $160 million deficit. We have New Brunswick with a surplus of $40.3 million. We have Saskatchewan doing quite well, and they are doing pretty good. They're in a net surplus position. Who else do we have? Well, we have BC with a $4.2 billion shortfall. And we have Manitoba with a $363 million shortfall. And Alberta has they are running a surplus as well. So across all of the provinces, you don't even get close. You don't get close to the $40 billion deficit that the government of Canada is running, with about half of the provinces running surpluses. So I'm sorry, Anita, that argument doesn't wash. It doesn't hold water. All of the money printing is still going on at the federal level by your government.
And that's why those Conservative MPs were laughing at her.
Absolutely.
These guys know this stuff. Like, they look at these things. They don't just make wild accusations the way that the Liberals do.
Yeah, well, the Liberals make up reality as they go along, as we've seen.
In addition, unlike the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, we actually have a plan to help Canadians, especially vulnerable Canadians, and the Deputy Prime Minister will table additional aspects of that plan tomorrow in the fall economic statement. But let's be clear, we are here for Canadians every single step of the way, unlike the party opposite that votes against every single time, Mr. Speaker.
So, does it count as a plan when your plan is terrible?
Yeah, I mean, their plan is let's supply Canadians with addictive substances that are paid for by the taxpayer, and then when things get so bad that they feel they can't continue, well, we'll offer them MAID.
And will demolish the economy and demolish rent prices, demolish affordability, and then we'll just print more money to solve the problem. And the entire Canadian population will just become completely 100% reliant on the government.
That's exactly what they want. They want Canadians to be reliant on the Liberal government so that they never get voted out. Because are you going to bite the hand that feeds you? You know, a good government will set up proper economic conditions so that the citizens can earn their own money and earn their own way through life. The Liberals, on the other hand, are trying to make it so difficult to earn a living through ordinary means that you have to turn to the government for help, and that you cannot get by without that government help.
It's slavery without the chains.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's plan is to increase mortgage payments by 150%, which he's already done. And now Scotiabank says government deficits have added 2 percentage points to interest rates. That works out to $700 a month, or $8,400 a year in higher mortgage payments linked directly to deficits, including the massive deficits by this government. A year ago, they promised a balanced budget. They broke the promise 6 months later. Will they come back tomorrow with a plan to balance the budget so we can bring down interest rates and inflation so that Canadians can keep their homes?
Yes.
The Honourable Minister for Housing.
Mr. Speaker, with respect, we have a plan that's going to build more homes, that's going to restore a level of affordability in the market. Where we are cutting taxes on home builders, he wants to raise them. Where we are funding cities to increase their ambition on home building, he wants to cut them. Mr. Speaker, it is hard to accept criticisms from a member of the House of Commons who, when he had the opportunity to be the minister responsible for housing, had access to $300 million and only got 99 homes built. Mr. Speaker, we are going to build homes, and we are going to build them by the millions.
Really, Fraser?
It's more than the, 13 homes that you guys have built?
And you're trying to spend $4 billion on this? And yeah, he wants to raise taxes, quote unquote, raise taxes on builders that are building the actual penthouse apartment buildings. Why are you allowing them to get the GST rebate, Fraser?
Yeah, why would you give a GST rebate on a luxury, like $10 million apartment?
And that's the question. That's what the Conservatives have been asking. They've said, well, we would support that if it was on, a below the affordability line.
Well, and another thing, Canadians don't want rent. This tax break that the Liberals are talking about, it's only on rental units, and it's on any rental unit. As I've said, luxury apartments included. Canadians want to buy their own home. Canadians want to have a little bit of land for themselves and their family. Canadians, although many Canadians do rent, young people who are wanting to start a family, many of them are looking to purchase their own property and become homeowners. I think that's the Canadian dream.
Well, because look at the economic output of that. If you just have a majority of Canadians that just keep renting for their entire lives, when they get to the end, they have no equity because they've been putting it all into rent. There's nothing left. At least if you own a home, yeah, you're paying a mortgage, even if it's a ridiculously expensive mortgage, but at least you're building equity. At least you have that as a worst case scenario if you have to sell. Or when you retire and you can downsize, you can sell that house because we all know you're going to need it because Trudeau wants you to have a full-time job as a senior citizen.
Well, and again, this isn't to talk down renting or renters, because there are definitely advantages to renting a home versus owning one. But right now, what Canadians are looking for is homes that they can purchase and live in with their families. They're not looking for rental units.
Well, I would imagine if you lined up 100 Canadians and you said, would you like to be paying rent for the rest of your life, or would you like to own a home mortgage-free the rest of your life? Most of them would say, mortgage-free, please.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, when I was housing minister, mortgage payments were less than half of what they are now, and rent was less than half of what it is now. Those are the hard realities. And now his plan, the Prime Minister's plan, is to quadruple the carbon tax. Quadruple it. That will increase the cost of gas, heat, groceries, and yes, even housing, because it takes trucks to ship those building materials. We know that we will have a carbon tax election to decide on whether we axe the tax as I choose or whether we hike it as he promises. But can we accept a Canadian compromise and at least freeze the tax in the meantime? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister for Housing and Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, it's interesting to listen to this version of revisionist history of the honourable member's time as a minister responsible for housing. If we actually go back and look at the numbers, you're going to see that he actually had housing starts less than 200,000 a year. Mr. Speaker, this morning we've seen data that shows that we're on pace to build more than 256,000 this year. If we want to compare apples to apples, Mr. Speaker, we're going to make a difference. Do you like apples? We're going to beat his numbers. How do you like them apples?
Oh Lord, that was so
That was
cheesy.
cringe.
That was terrible.
Yikes.
And he's what was that? An attempt at the slapdown Pierre's apple eating interview? I think so, but it didn't land at all. Yeah. And Fraser, you're talking revisionist history. There's nothing that Pierre said that was factually incorrect. It is 100% accurate that housing costs were less than half. Mortgage rates were far lower. Mortgage payments were less than half. Rent was less than half. There's nothing that he said that was incorrect. But this is what the Liberals have resorted to doing because they have nothing else. All they have is their carbon tax, so they gaslight. So good luck with that, because Canadians understand that you're lying through your teeth.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I think the minister should stick to photo ops because comedy is surely not his thing. Neither are numbers, Mr. Speaker. Everything the Prime Minister has said about this Atlantis subsidy has proven false. One, it's billions of dollars over budget before shovels in the ground, years behind payback even before the project begins, and he claimed that it was going to create jobs for Canadians. We now learn that at least 1,500 or a majority of the jobs are going to go to temporary foreign workers. Will the Prime Minister release the contract now so that we can find out how much Canadian taxpayers are going to have to spend to give paychecks to South Korean workers?
The Honourable Minister for Housing and Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, during the COVID-19 pandemic, he opposed spending that was supporting families. Now, during a national housing crisis, he opposes government investments that are actually going to get more homes built. And when we have the opportunity to make generational investments that's going to gain a toehold in a new industry, he opposes it without vision for what the future economy could be when we create many thousands of jobs. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to invest in the Canadian economy and put workers in make sure they bring home paychecks that are going to put food on the table for their families.
Hear, hear.
Oh my goodness. Fraser's such an awful orator.
Oh, he's terrible. His mentor is Justin Trudeau. What do you expect?
There you go.
But here's the thing. This is the problem. You sit on top of the chicken coop and crow that you're making these investments, and then you're bringing in these companies that are saying, well, no thank you, Canadians. We want to bring cheap labor in instead.
Well, that's the thing, because remember, the government does not have its own money. So how this is working is they are taking money from Canadians, Canadian taxpayers. The government is taking it, and then they're not investing it back in Canada and hiring Canadian workers. They're hiring foreign workers. So they are literally taking Canadians' money from Canadians and giving it to foreign workers. Why are we not doing this work at home? And
they're also giving it to a big corporation. And I get it. You want to incentivize corporations to come in. But hello, look at the optics of what's going on here, people. You have Canadians that are living in cars, and you're taking literally their money and giving it to a big corporation. The optics don't look great. This is why Stephen Harper said, when your economy is going well, stop the deficit spending.
Because there's no need for it.
There is no need for it. You need to hold on to it. So you stabilize interest rates, and then the supposed boom in the economy is going to put money in Canadians' pockets so then they can borrow. That's how this works. But the good news is that it doesn't sound like this is going to be not working for much longer, because as we've been saying since March of 2023, we think an election is coming. And it's not just because we think an election is coming, and we're not doing this for clicks either. We are taking information that we've been told, and we're taking information that CBC has given us, and reading the tea leaves of what the NDP are doing, what the parties are doing, and it sure as heck looks like an election is coming. But now the newspapers are starting to think an election is also coming. Fox and her sleuthing again managed to dig up an article.
Thank you, Reddit.
That was posted last week. Toronto Sun. All signs point to a federal election in 2024. And their main justification in this is because of mainly the Liberal polling. So they think that either the Liberals need to call an election next year, which they don't think they will, or the NDP need to do that. And what are they saying? Well, the interesting thing is they are saying basically the same thing we've been saying. Quote, they probably don't want an election either, although they might see an opportunity in the Liberals' misery. But whether NDP leadership wants a vote, party rank and file put a lot of pressure on leader Jagmeet Singh at their national convention in Hamilton last month. Get a deal on pharmacare by January or pull the plug, and watch the Liberals swirl down the drain. Here's one of the most important parts of this article. Quote, most minority governments don't last more than 2 1/3 years. That means every day the Trudeau government is on thinner and thinner ice. End quote. although winter is coming, it certainly seems like that ice is getting very, very thin.